I'm not giving true justice to working with data sources and data sets by giving you 2 days full, but at least you have been exposed. And especially for you next semester, Keegan, to my knowledge, the class that you're going to be taking, the one that had, and if it goes with the old format, it'll be ASP.NET. If it goes with the new format, it'll be Node.js. But if it goes with the old format, we're still going to be working with SQL Server. If we go with the new format, we're going to be using MongoDB, which is another type of database, but still going through this and having experience with databases is going to do nothing but help both of you. All right. So as they mention here in this chapter, you'll learn how to use data sources and data sets. Okay. The easiest way to work with forms is to use these because they're built in. The code is written for you. All right. As it says there, this is especially useful for developing simple applications or prototyping larger applications. So if the idea is, if all we wanted to be able to do was to kind of show every record that was in those 5 tables that we had, the orders table, the customers table, the order details table, and the other ones, if we wanted to be able to do that, this would probably be the easiest way of doing it. Now, they mentioned that all the applications in here are going to be using SQL Server, Express, Local DB. That's pretty much what we have been using. They do mention, and you'll see this in here, it's a little bit hard to comprehend, but as it says, the difference will be the connection string that you have in your database. The other thing is every single example that we go through this week is going to be based off of the, I think they call it the MMA Books database. I gave you a bunch of attachments that I emailed you this morning. And the first attachment that I emailed you, and I'm going to break away from this share, and I'm going to show you that other one in just a second. And I don't expect it to totally 100% make sense. But again, I wanted you to at least be able to see it. All right, so let's see, where is that? Right here. So this is it. It's MMA Books. It's Muroc something or other, A Books. I don't remember. Now, hopefully this makes sense to you from the stuff we've talked about before. What this says is, if it already exists, drop it. All right, then we're going to create it. What you notice when you actually, this is a script. And I decided to put this out there so you could see how actual scripts run. And with scripts, whenever you want to start something new, you literally use the word go. So you can see that in here. They're creating the database, go. They're making the database active, go. All right, so they're doing a bunch of stuff in here. What I'm most concerned with is, notice there is a customers table here. This shouldn't be any surprise to you, anything that's in here, because we've looked at this before. Now, the only thing that might look a little funky to you, for lack of better words, is you might look at zip code and say, well, why is it 15? The biggest zip code you'd have would be 5 digits, a dash, and 4 digits. It's not true. Because what you'll find is a lot of times they will ask you for a country code. And sometimes the country code can be longer than our zip code. This weekend, I'm just giving you a little aside, you may or may not care, but this weekend, I took one of the Android apps that I wrote and I put it out on the Google Play Store. And I taped myself going through all the steps so that people would be able to look at it. Well, the point is, right near the bottom of one of the first screens that you go through, they ask you for your country code. All right, so you do see it in different places. All right, there's a bunch of stuff in here with setting different types of things on and off. For right now, really and truly, that's not that important. But you've got customers. Then you've got invoice line items. Where they have invoices and invoice line items, in the example that we went through, we had orders and order details. they're pretty much the same thing. So an invoice is an order that you make, and the line items are the things that are held inside of those orders. All right. Should we have used this database instead of the one I used? Maybe. I don't know. But in the end, it's really and truly not that big a thing. So these are the line items. These are the invoices. Here's what they call order options. So notice these are things that actually could be different. Things like sales tax rate. I know, for example, in some states, when you order from the internet, there's no sales tax at all. In other states, there is a sales tax. It's all different the way that that's handled. First book ship charge, additional book ship charge. Again, think about this. Let's say they were selling it to a bookstore. If they were selling me one copy of a book, they're going to charge me probably the full price. But if it's a bookstore that's going to get 100 copies, they're going to give them a break on the price. All right. Then you've got your products. Again, not that different from the products that we looked at. Then you've got your states. All right. Again, see how simple that is. State code and a state name. So in here, they're just adding all of the information. All right. And you can see there's a lot of it. So what we'll do a little bit later today, and I don't know if it'll work in one swoop or not, but I'm gonna try it, and I'm gonna have you watch me. I'm gonna see if I can create this database and then boom, throw every record in there right away and see if this is good enough that it can literally handle 1,011 lines. All right. What I might do, just so I'm sure it'll work out okay, is to go build in the first 111 lines, build all the tables right here, and then go in and grab the whole other 900 lines, copy the whole thing to the clipboard, and boom. Once we do that, then we'll have the entire database set up. All right. So with that said, let me jump back into what we're going through in the chapter. And again, I can't say this to you too many times. Don't worry if it doesn't make a lot of sense. All right. If you understand the overall concept of what's going on, that's much more important. All right. So what you're going to see today is a little bit different way of bringing a database in. All right. And you'll notice if you look up here, they talk about a data source. And as it says, it specifies the source of a data for an application. But not every source of data for an application is going to be a database. Now, the next 6 figures, so the next 12 or 13 pages, are going to show doing it that way. But that doesn't mean that that's the way that you have to do it. All right. So it's going to look a lot different as you step your way through this. And that's what the author is saying right here. So you come in here, you've got this form. You've seen this kind of thing before. All right. So they've got this thing called product maintenance. And there it is. Once you do that, you come into here. All right. You come into here, and usually you come into like the SQL Server window or whatever it is, and you choose data source, and notice what comes up. If you already have a data source, in other words, if you already have a connection to the database and you start to go through this, you can grab that connection. If you don't already have one, or if you want to create a new one, you'll do this. And as it says right here, this is what comes up. And you might say, well, big deal, who cares? You'll see why it's a big deal in just a couple slides here. So once they do that, it's going to show you all the fields right here. And I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe by default, it shows you all these fields as labels. It's either labels or text boxes. What's the difference? There's a big difference. If they're labels, it's read only. If they're text boxes, you can change the data that's in there. Plus, if you remember how we set ours up with using a drop down, you can make these different fields. If you want to, you can make one or more of them a drop down list as well. So as it says, once you set up a data source, it'll show you the tables and the columns that are available to you in your application. So once you've set it up over here, as you notice over here, now they're starting to show the different information that's in there. So we'll try to walk through this. All right. I've never tried doing it before like this, where we're doing it interactively over the internet, but we'll try and see what happens. All right. Even if for some reason this does not work, as we try to go through this, you will still have the database. You will still have the records. You will still have both the two examples that are in the chapter and some extra exercises that I sent in the last email or two to you. So you'll be able to take a look at it. Now, if this blows up in my face and we have nothing but problems, yeah, then tomorrow I'm not even sure what we're going to do. If we have nothing but problems with this today, then tomorrow probably what I'll do is just lecture on 19, and then that'll be it. But if it works, I think it'll be worth our time to look at this. All right. So the author says you can display this window, right? Whoops, sorry. This window, where are you? Right there, this data sources window. Oops. And the author says you can display it by clicking on the data sources tab that's on the left edge of the Visual Studio window, or by selecting this. You can go to view right here, and we've never really done this, but there's a thing in here that says other windows that's got a bunch of different stuff in there that basically we've talked very little about. All right. And a lot of it is some of the stuff, at least in there, they're more advanced topics. All right. And in a beginning class, there's just not time to go through that kind of stuff. So as it says, to create a data source, you can click the add data source link, then you can drag it onto the form. It's even easier than that. It's going to bring up a wizard. And as it says, when it brings up a wizard, there's 3 different ways that you can start this wizard. And the way that you are going to do it is going to depend on whether or not you already have a data source. All right. It says, note that you can only use the first technique, which is the one I think they look at in here, if you don't already have a data source. And again, what's a data source? It's where you're getting the data from. So as you step through this wizard, as they mentioned right here, this figure 18.2, shows the first step of the wizard. Notice it says it lets you specify the type of data source. Usually, again, not always, but usually you'll choose the database option. All right. Some other stuff that you can do. Now, I know that Mr. Smith got into this with his class. To my knowledge, Evan did not, and I did not with you guys. There's other ways that you can create programs in C#. One way that you can do this is you can create what's called a data service. And I want to give you an example, because years ago, I took a class during the summer that was a week long when I was at the other school, my school in Wisconsin. And there was a teacher who had gone out and learned a bunch of this stuff on his own, and he taught a class on it, and it was kind of cool. What he did, and it's not going to sound like it's that great now, but back then especially, it was pretty cool. So he had his oh great, I got to shut my window. I'm sorry. The guy next to me has just started mowing. All right, so his entire GUI was, he had a big form, and on the form he had 2 big text boxes. All right, and both text boxes were multi-line, and each text box underneath it had a button. So 2 text boxes, 2 buttons, that was it. And if you use the text box on the left, all right, if you use the text box on the left, you could type in anything you wanted. If you click the button, this guy was originally, he had relatives from France. And if you click the button, it would take what you said and in the other text box, it would translate it for you into French. All right. And if somebody knew French but not English, you could do it the other way. The reason that I'm telling you this is when you create a service like that, you can create for yourself an application, something that's meant to be used in Visual Studio in C#, and you literally, believe it or not, they've got what's referred to as an electronic yellow pages, where you can create these services. You can put them in these yellow pages, and other people can purchase them. And the reason that I'm telling you that is quite often when you work with these Windows and web services, you don't use a database. So it always depends. If I'm creating something for a company to use, almost always I'm just going to choose database. All right. The other stuff that's in here, again, the service I just mentioned, the object, you could use that, again, if you were using some of the newer NoSQL type of databases that rather than doing a lot of database programming, what they're doing is they're doing just regular programming and they're mapping that to a database. SharePoint, I basically know nothing about. It's a hardware feature. But the point is, you start out, you come in here, you click this button that says add new data source. Boom. It brings you here. Typically, again, you're going to choose database. Most people do. And you click next. All right. Not that that's a real big thing. But if you want a little more explanation, they do give it in the book more than I just did. All right. So then it says how to choose the database model for the source. So this is the second step. So we chose data source. Okay, we clicked that first link. Then we chose database. We click next. So this is where we are. So again, the author says what's going to happen here is, do you already have a connection to a database? If you do and you want to use that connection, then you will follow the steps that are right here. If you don't, you can choose a new connection. We'll look at both in just a second. All right, so as it says, it lets you choose the data connection you want to connect to into the database. It's a little confusing, but what you can do is you can have multiple connections to the same database. Why would you want to do that? As an example, all right, so as an example, in the application that we worked on last week, we might have 5 different connections, one to each of our databases, so that every time we chose a certain connection, it would bring up that table. All right. We might have even more than 5 because we might start doing some joins on our tables. All right. So in the example they're going to show there, they're going to attach this database that I sent you, this mmabooks.mdf. All right. And it says if you use a connection string like this, Visual Studio will display a dialog box when you click the next button and ask if you want to include the file in your project. We'll see it in just a minute. If you include the database file, notice it'll modify your connection string. So it's going to start taking over. Now, this is not that different from what we did, just so you know. It's very similar to what we did the other day when we right mouse clicked on the name of our project and we chose basically add new item and we chose database. All right. The same kind of thing is happening. The difference is, and that's why I want to go over this in detail, is when we did this, all right, when we did this, you may or may not have noticed this, it didn't save permanently our changes. They were not permanently saved. All right. And this is what I want to mention to you, what's in here. It says by default, the database file that's included in your project is copied to the output directory every time the project is built. Then when you run the application, it works with that copy. This means any changes you make to the database aren't applied to the file in the project directory. Now, that might confuse you, but in English, what they're saying is our copy that we're running with, the one that we have been using, all right, the one that we right mouse clicked on the name of our project and chose new rather, or add new item and chose database, that's a copy of what existed over on the left-hand side in our SQL Explorer database. That's why it says here, each time you rebuild the app, the database in the output directory is overridden. It says if you want to change the way this works, you can select the database file over here in the Solution Explorer, and I believe you have to go over and right mouse click on it, go down to its properties, and you have to change its property of copy to output directory from copy always to copy if newer. All right. So in other words, what it's saying is instead of always working with a copy, only work with a copy if you've made some changes, for lack of better words. All right. So when you start running it, when it uses local DB, you're going to see what this is in just a minute. The engine is started if it's not already running. And as it says, the first time you try to connect, an instance of the engine has to be created before it starts. Because of that, that connection may fail with a timeout message. You know, what you're trying to do here is you're trying to make your program talk to your database. Sometimes it fails. It can fail for a lot of reasons. All right. For instance, Keegan, you've mentioned that you've got a very slow internet connection. It could fail. What we've had happen in the past is when I taught this class 2 years ago, I think it was, one of those years, I had like 14 people in there. And we were all trying to do the same thing at the same time. Now, we were all working with our own copies, but we were all sucking off the same internet. And it seemed to slow down. And I think if we had 14 people in there, 12 of them worked and 2 of them timed out. But again, I think the 2 that timed out had older machines. So we've gone through, we've clicked database, and now we're here. All right. So if we're here, it's going to say, if you've already got a connection, there'll be something in here like this. If you don't have anything in here, if you're not sure, you can click the down arrow right here and it'll show you something. But if there's nothing in there whatsoever, nothing, when you click the down arrow, there'll be nothing there and this will be empty. Then what you'll want to do is you'll want to click new connection. The other thing that I strongly recommend, if this is not showing on yours, it's got the plus sign here and it just says connection, click it so the minus sign is here. Grab this information that's right there. Grab that, copy it to the clipboard, and just put it someplace. All right? That shows you your entire data source. It shows you the name of your database. It shows you the path to your database, and it shows you the timeout that you're going to have. All right? So virtually 100% of the time, you'll want to make a copy of that just so you have one. All right, let's see. Yeah, the choose your connection. So that's this. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. It says if you click the new connection wizard from the 3rd step, the add connection dialog box that's here will show. We're going to run through this whole thing in just a second. Says the dialog box helps you identify the type of database you want to access. It says how you do this depends on what you're using and how you got in there to run it. What I've always had students use is what they say right here. Select Microsoft SQL Server database file, the one that's right here. All right, so let's look at these quickly and talk about the differences between them. Access, I think I've mentioned this to you before, but in case I have not, Access is a very simplistic relational database management system that comes with Office. All right. It's not designed to support hundreds of users. I've seen it blow up already with more than 10 users. All right. The next one, ODBC data source. Again, open database connectivity. Data source, not always, but normally, that's going to be a connection that's not a database connection. You're connecting to a spreadsheet, It could be a file that actually what's called a CSV file, which means that comma separated variable file. So you just got a bunch of stuff in there, and each line or each record is separated. There's a new line at the end, and each field has a comma between it. The Microsoft SQL Server, that one, if you chose that one, the third one here, you're actually hooking up to an external server someplace. So the one that we would use virtually all of the time would be this, Microsoft SQL Server database file. Oracle is, again, another DBMS, and this is kind of a wild card, something that doesn't fit in there. So we choose this, and when we did, you'd see this over here. It would say this. If you click change, that's when this thing comes up. All right. And then it says the database file name. Well, if it's not showing a file name, usually you can click browse there. All right. I've had it happen occasionally where when I click browse, for whatever reason, it kind of locks up. But normally you can do that. It may already be filled in with you or for you after you set the stuff up earlier. This, I think I've mentioned before too. If you click use Windows connection, the rest of this gets grayed out, which means that anybody who's on this machine can use this database. If I click here on this button, it adds an extra layer of security. That means not only, even if I'm in here in Windows, I still need a username, I still need a password. All right, and also typically you don't have to, but people click the test connection button and you'll just get a message that comes up and it says that worked. So that's pretty much everything that's in here. Again, I get tired after a while of sitting there and reading stuff to you. You're going to learn the most by just paging through this, looking at the pictures, and reading the description that's after them. I think that's how you learn the most. All right. When you start to do this stuff, and you start to build the connection string, you'll notice there it gets saved for you. The connection string information does get saved for you in this app.config file. Now, if you remember just a couple minutes ago, I said, well, you should save that. And you're like, why should I save it? It's already in that file. That's true. All right. I've already in the past have had to go in and manually change that app.config file because something gets hosed. It just stops working. So if I did and I needed to know what I had in there originally, that's why I'm saving the copy of it. All right. And they show you the kind of thing. Well, I guess what will happen is they don't show it to you, but it says here, do you want to save the connection string? If you check this, it'll put it in that app config file. You should always save it. You can call it whatever you want, but they've got it called the name of the database connection string. Nothing wrong with that either. So the information that gets stored there is shown right here. Most of this stuff, believe it or not, we've already talked about. It's saying that right here, this is the name of the connection string, and inside of here, this is the stuff that it has in it. So it has the data source, it has the attached DB file name, it has the integrated security, and it has the connect timeout. And I want to mention something to you that may sound really simplistic. Believe me, it is not simplistic. Hopefully you notice when you look at this, this is a double quote, or maybe it's even a single, it doesn't matter, but that's one of them. That's the one that ends it. All right. What you typically see is all of the information that's right here, even though you won't be able to see it all on the screen at the same time, you typically want to put that in or on the same line. If you don't, it's so easy for the system to get confused. I've seen not only that, but even the provider name here. So quite often, and I'll do it this way, I'll put all of this stuff that you see right here. And if you're really, not so about it, you can put this whole thing on one line. It'll work. It'll be way off where you'll have to move a lot to see it. But by doing that, it's trying to separate something that's inside of a double quote or a single quote with a new line can really screw up the system. I'm just telling you that because I've been hit with that before. All right. It says by default, it's saved in the app config file. If that's not what you want, we could have unchecked that before. It says if you don't save it, the string is specified for the connection of each table adapter you create. Well, bottom line is you're going to have to do more work yourselves if that information is not available. All right. You can also enter the name that you want to use. Yeah, again, it's all done for you. You should just do it that way, period. All right. The last step then allows you to choose the database objects. This may look confusing. First time I saw it, it sure did. So you'll notice here, just pretend for a second that I click this, the thing that's in blue. Let's pretend I click this. Then all this would go away for now, and it would say tables, views, stored procedures, and functions. The only thing that we've worked with has been tables. All right. A view, I think I mentioned this to you, a view is a saved query. So if we saved our queries as views, we could check that one. Stored procedures is when you write your own code to manipulate this. It's not all that different from what I showed you at the beginning with those go statements and things like that. All right. But we don't have either of those. We haven't written any of our own functions. If you come up here and you click on here, and then you can choose whichever tables you want to appear in this data connection. So notice in this connection, what we're saying is we want it to use the products table, and we want it to display the product code, the product description, and the unit price. For whatever reason, we don't care about the quantity on hand. So all that's going to do is show this. We can go back later if we decide we want quantity on hand. We can go back into this view and then check it if we want to do that. So the author mentions this is like the fourth or fifth step. You choose the database objects you want to include. So you can choose any tables, views, etc. that you want. And you can choose any fields from any of those tables, views, etc. that you want. All right. You can also come up with a name. Now, if I was going to make a bunch of these different data sets, I probably wouldn't call this one Books Database. I might call this one MMA Books Dataset Products. So if I did another one for invoices, I'd call that one MMA Books Dataset Invoices, etc. All right. Okay, before we go on to the schema, because I've already gotten the warning here and it's telling me that I've got 5 minutes left and it'll take longer than that, I'm going to generate a new URL for you. It is 8:37. Let's please plan on coming back at 8:45 in about 8 minutes. All right, so drop off and I'll see you again in 8 minutes. Thanks.